Alright, so I just need to know everyone's, everyone's opinion on this chapter. I'm so curious to hear everyone's opinion on this chapter. I've read this book before and I couldn't wait to get to this chapter, so I can't wait for you guys to read it with me, and I can't wait for us all to uh, go through it. And I'm really excited, and like, if you have any thoughts, even good thoughts, bad thoughts, whatever, um, put them down below. And of course, like I say, I will put the link of the playlist in the comments and descriptions below. Chapter 5, The Worst. Unbelievable. On the second floor of Norland Hall at the Baltimore Center for the Blind, a whole walk-in closet full of canes hanging on hooks surrounded Natalie like a stalactite nightmare. Natalie heard the voice repeating, "Find one that fits. Find one that fits." But her hands froze and the voice echoed in her head. Definitely, absolutely the worst thing so far, she thought. Forget the weird kids and a braille lesson where she learned that there are 6 dots in a braille cell and that different combinations of dots stood for different letters. A single dot, or bump, was the letter A, while B, C, E, I, and K all had 2 dots, but each set of dots was arranged differently. Impossible. How in the world were a bunch of bumps ever going to mean something? But by far, the cane was her greatest fear, because of all it represented, and all that it would strip away, like her freedom, and her anonymity. Anonymity. They may as well hang a sign around her neck, too. Pathetic blind person. Ouch. As a blind person, I'm offended. Natalie, go ahead. Go ahead, hun, urged the woman who was Natalie's new cane instructor. Lift a cane off the wall and see if it's the kind you want. But Natalie didn't want a cane. She didn't need a cane. What would her friends think if they saw her right now? Would she even want to tell Meredith about this? The instructor, Miss Audra, patiently repeated the instructions. Just choose one, she urged. She was a young teacher. From what Natalie could see of Miss Audra, she was petite, probably no taller than Natalie herself. And Natalie had glimpsed a long braid down the instructor's back. Select one and let's see if it's the right length, Miss Audra prodded. Natalie reached out, her fingers quivering, hesitating because she didn't want to touch a cane, let alone use it. Finally, she grabbed one, yanking it off the hook so fiercely that she knocked several other canes onto the floor with a loud clatter. Don't worry, we'll pick them up later, Miss Audra said, unfazed by the noise and the mess. Focus on the cane in your hand, Natalie. Natalie tapped the cane tip on the floor. A little too hard, probably, and could tell it had a stationary pencil tip as opposed to the canes that had a little wheel that rolled when the cane moved side to side. Is that the kind you want? Miss Audra asked. Want? Want? I don't want a cane! Natalie screamed silently to herself. All right, then. Miss Audra's voice maintained its calm despite the lack of response from Natalie. Let's see if it's the right size. Stand up tall, Natalie. Shoulders back and and hold the cane in front of you. Closer. That's it. What did we just talk about? If it's up to your breastbone, if it's under your armpit, if it's up to your armpit, it's the right length. What do you think? The cane was slightly higher than her waist. Must have been for a midget, Natalie thought. A bit snidely, or a small child, she realized. No, Miss Audra said, when Natalie maintained her silence. It's not the right one for you, is it? It's way too short. Natalie fumbled around for another cane. By feeling bumps along its length, she could tell it was the folding type, which most students had. The tip was straight, no roller, and it came up to her armpit. How about that one? Miss Audra asked. Natalie nodded barely, but her heart was pounding, and the blood was throbbing in her temples. If she learned how to use that cane, there would be no going back. She would be giving in, admitting to the problem, opening the door to loathsome blindness. Afraid, she squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out how it would look and what it would mean. Jeez, don't be such... All right, then. That's your cane. It has 3 parts. The grip, the stem, some people call it the shaft, tee-hee, and the tip. When we're finished together, take this cane back to your room. A lot of kids put something on the handle, the grip, to identify it as theirs. A ribbon, or some yarn, or a keychain, maybe. Identify it as hers? Natalie almost laughed. No way. And please, Miss Audra emphasized, keep the cane in a special place in your room, Natalie. Always in the same place so you know where it is. When you have O&M, orientation and mobility class, you need to bring it with you. If she lost it, she'd be glad, Natalie thought. Now, Miss Audra continued, a cane is really just an extension of your finger, a way of telling you what's coming up. Let's have you put the sleep shade on and get out into the hall to try it. But when Miss Audra handed Natalie the sleep shade, the spongy black mask, Natalie drew the line. She did not want to be blind, or to blind herself with the shade, and take the cane into the hall and try it. She certainly did not want to take the cane back to her room and find a special place for it. Tears welled in Natalie's eyes and spilled down her cheeks. Natalie, what's wrong? Miss Audra put an arm around Natalie's shoulders and guided her to a chair. Here, sit down. Please, talk to me. Natalie sat and held the sleep shade in her lap. What is it, Natalie? It's just that I don't want a cane, she said finally. I don't want to learn how to use it. Why not? Why not? Natalie swung her head around and screwed up her face, repeating the question as though Miss Audra was crazy to ask it. Yes, why not? Because I'm not blind, because I don't need a cane, because I don't want to lose my freedom. Lose your freedom? Miss Audra didn't miss a beat. Yes, Natalie insisted, frustrated that Miss Audra didn't seem to understand. The minute I use that cane, people will look at me like a freak. People will look at me like, whoa, she's disabled. But Natalie, I don't want people looking at me like I'm weird, like I'm a freak. Natalie put a hand to her mouth, surprised at herself for saying those things out loud. What a hypocrite! What was happening to her? Wasn't it Natalie who wanted the student council to convince this special panel of the handicapped kids back at Western Allegheny High School? At Western Allegheny High School so they could educate the other kids about their disabilities? She had worked to convince each one of those students, Peter Maxwell, who used a wheelchair, Claire McDermott, who was deaf, and Brittany Tedesco, who was dyslexic, to take part. Each one of them finally agreed to sit at a table as a panel and pass a microphone around to answer questions and talk about their disabilities. Natalie had arranged the whole thing, and here she was calling those great kids freaks. The shame of it all quashed her anger, and in the silence that followed, Natalie dropped her head. Miss Audra paused before continuing in her steady voice. Surely you know what the report says about your eyesight, Natalie. In the event that you lose the rest of your sight, we want you to be ready. That is why you're here, so that you will have some skills when the day comes. If the day comes, Natalie interrupted. Okay, if the day comes, so you aren't totally helpless. She paused again. You don't want to be helpless, do you? No. Slowly, Natalie shook her head. She did not ever want to be helpless. She was already helpless enough. Miss Audra touched one of Natalie's knees. Then let us prepare you, Natalie. Let us give you the skills you would need in case that day comes. She sounded so earnest, so sincere, that Natalie wanted to soften, but she couldn't. Who is your doctor, Natalie? Someone in Baltimore? No, Natalie replied. It's Dr. Rose, in Rockville. What did Dr. Rose tell you, Natalie? Natalie began chewing on her bottom lip. She didn't want to repeat or even think about what Dr. Rose had told her, because that's when it all really started, the big change inside, the panic. The fear. Suddenly the phone rang. The rude interruption. And Miss Audra touched Natalie's knee again. Would you excuse me for a minute, Natalie? I've been waiting for that call, and I need to take it. I won't be a minute. Natalie quickly nodded. Then, as soon as her instructor walked away, Natalie stood up and bolted from the room. Don't forget to leave your comments below and subscribe.